Hello everyone, Someone Bard here, and welcome to some more of Sulli-Ween. And this episode is my 200th episode! Yep, it's my 200th episode on this channel, and to celebrate, I like to do something special for this being the month of Halloween. A compare and contrast of Poltergeist. In 1982, Steven Spielberg co-wrote and co-produced a horror classic with Tobe Hooper directing, that not only has led to 2 sequels, but has brought people's fascination with ghosts, the paranormal, and such. Nowadays it's seen as being dated and a bit silly, but it's still effective as a scary movie, and a good one nonetheless. But in 2015, a remake of the original came out produced by Sam Raimi and directed by Gil Kenan. And for many, it's seen as being pointless and not needed, even though it was talked about for a while before it came out. Yet there might be a few good things about the remake that differ from the original, even if it's not strong. And I'm going over both versions today, so let's get started with the main lead. In the original, it's Carol Ann, played by Heather O'Rourke, who's cute and does a good job playing the role, but I don't find her to be creepy, if that's what the makers were going for early on. Because her famous line and the way she says it seems unnatural to me. But in the remake, it's Madison, or Maddie, played by Candy Clements, who, while isn't all that creepy, is actually a real kid. She swears, has a bit of fun, and surprisingly, knows a little more than what the parents think. Yeah, her saying the famous line doesn't have much of a punch to it, but everything else with her seems right, and is more subtle than the original. So, sorry to say, but while Carol Ann is good and all, I'd go with Maddie for the realistic portrayal of a kid. The new ones. Now let's move on to the supporting cast. Let's look at the rest of the family. In the original, it's the Freelings, with the father, Steve, played by Craig T. Nelson, the mother, Diane, played by Jo Beth Williams, the son, Robbie, played by Oliver Robbins, and the eldest daughter, Dana, played by Dominique Dune. They're all a nice cast and they do well with their performances, and seeing them witness such horror is pretty frightening. To which the opposite comes from the remake, which are the Bowens, the father, played by Sam Rockwell, the mother, Amy, played by Rosemary DeWitt, the son, Griffin, played by Kyle Catlett, and the eldest daughter, Kendra, played by Saxon Charbonneau. Unlike the original, this family to me appears sort of unlikable and stale. That is, except for Griffin, who's on the same level of interest as Maddie. He knows something is wrong with the house and wants to leave as soon as he notices the strange things going on, and he felt responsible for leaving his sister behind than Robbie was. So even though Griffin is the only other family member that's good in the remake, the original felt more believable and emotional. The paranormal investigators in both versions have good character and are a fine and nice cast, though the original gave a little more time to them than the remake, even though the remake works with them well. How about the medium? In the original is Tangina Barons, played by Zelda Rubinstein, and in the remake it's Kerrigan Burke, played by Jared Harris. Like the investigators, these two work well and have good character. But where Burke is established from his TV shows and his stories about his wounds from various ghost searches, and to be fair they do make for a nice character background, Barons just appears with no establishment or background. But what sets them apart is their speech about the poltergeist in the family's house, and Barons takes the cake for how she says it and what she's saying, where Burke just didn't hold my attention. So as much as Burke gives a fairly decent performance, Barons is the one I choose. And overall, the supporting cast in the original is much better at handling every moment with the right touch, where the remake, despite having good characters, falls flat in comparison. The old ones. Next up is the effects. Now both movies do have good effects and work well, but each one treats them very differently. In the original, it's a mixture of practical and optical, and sometimes it's pretty effective, but other times it's dated, and no surprise that Richard Edlund, who supervised the effects in this film, would 2 years later do effects for Ghostbusters, which also has the same effective and dated effects. But in the remake, it's mostly computer-generated with occasional puppetry. But where most of it seems obvious and not effective, some of it seems similar to the original, and those work very well. And while I do admire the effects in the original, I have to go with the remake on this. Yeah, it's all digital effects, but they work very well, and have a bit more consistency than the original. The new ones. Now I have a new category for this, which is the scares. Given that they're both horror movies, they do have to show ways of scaring both characters and audiences. But both are completely different when it comes to this. In the original, all the scares were very effective, from being subtle to being extreme. And the ones that really get me are the ghost that pops out of the closet, the entire climax, and yes, even the screams scare me. Not since the original King Kong has screaming ever been so terrifying. However, the remake doesn't have that distinction. Yeah, it tries to make some frights, but it fails to be scary and aren't effective. There wasn't any surprises since the trailer gave away some of them, and with the effects being mostly computer generated, the scenes are weakened in that regard. Which is why the original with its scares are very well handled. Even its trailer is pretty scary, without giving too much away. Even if the effects are dated, they manage to deliver the most frightening moments in movies. That, and they mostly scared me on the inside. The old ones. And finally, let's finish up with the movie as a whole. In many ways, this is a no-brainer that the original is better, but the remake has like one or two decent scenes. Like it shows the world between the ghost world and ours, being a hybrid of both the house and the other side. It's certainly a nice addition, and instead of the mother going in after the daughter, it's the son, mostly for being responsible for his sister's disappearance and has to make up for it. The film does establish the family moving in and as a coda them trying to find a new house. But a majority of it tries to be an homage to the original, and even when it references the original, they're done very poorly. Like when the young daughter gets caught in the closet. In the original, it's done intensely with things getting sucked into the closet, all while the rest of the family tries to save the son from being eaten by the tree. But in the remake, it's done more quietly, and does bring in a sense of ease to which we know what will happen. And it does work, and it isn't as intense. But it makes it unbalanced with the scenes of the tree attacking the son and the eldest daughter getting stuck in the basement or garage, all while the parents are having dinner with friends. How about the clown toy? Well, in the original, it just happens to be there, and why would the son have the doll when he's afraid of it? It seems odd that way. But the build-up to when it attacks is done well, and it's after the notion that the family thinks the house is clean. But in the remake, the clown is part of the house, even hidden away in the attic. And even though it moving about is a nice touch, and the attack is all really there and not CG, it's basically ruined because it happens 20 or 30 minutes into the film, and this occurs before the tree attacks. But how about the conversations of the cemetery moving? In the original, it's done in the cemetery, and it doesn't give away where it originally was until the end, where lots of skeletons and coffins pop up, and it's only the tombstones that were moved. There's no explanation why that is, but the scene is pretty scary to not question. But in the remake, the conversation was done at the dinner scene, almost word for word. But it already gave away the twist of the tombstones being moved, and we only see one skeleton pop out of the ground when there's thousands of ghosts in the house. But the original has one problem for me, in that there's lots of whispering in the second act. Okay, I get why, because the family's sleeping, but do they really have to whisper when they're not sleeping? But that just might be me. Yet everything else about the original tends to be both specific and vague with the supernatural in the house, making the film all the more engaging. Where the remake, despite having some good elements in it, is kind of a bore. Nothing exciting, intense, or scary happens, and its attempts to recapture the original are done wrong and pretty much backwards. And overall, the original is fantastic. Sure, it's dated in some areas, but it's all intense, pretty suspenseful, and pretty much scary in the right moments. The old wins. So the overall winner is the original. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Facebook or Twitter, support me on Patreon, and until next week for the conclusion of Sulli-Ween.